Hey guys, it's Courtney and welcome to another chart breakdown. Where we'll be going over my thoughts on Euro USD for the week. I want to explain what ended up happening last week, how that played out, and then what I'm looking for this week. Before we get started with our chart analysis, I did want to briefly cover the news. There is news, I think, every day this week. So you want to make sure, except for Friday. So you want to make sure you're paying attention to it. We have PMI on Monday. We have ADP on Tuesday. The biggest one is going to be FOMC on Wednesday. That could really push the market. The last FOMC meeting, the market went crazy. So I'm really taking caution on Wednesday because that could be a really big day. And then Thursday we have our normal jobs claims, continuous jobs claims, and existing home sales. Um, so just be aware of when you're trading, if there's news coming out to kind of pay attention for that. All right, and then now let's talk about last week, how last week ended up playing out. It was basically kind of in the same range for the whole week. You really would have had some patience waiting for those zones we talked about price breaking out of. So let's start. I'm gonna drop down just to the 30-minute. At the start of the week on Monday, I did take this buy. So on Sunday when we marked up, this was the low, and we were trying to decide if price was going to push up or kind of break this area and sell down. At that time, there was a bearish divergence here. That divergence extended, but we'll talk about that. So there was divergence, there was trend line breaks. So I didn't know if price was going to sell from here or not, but price looked like it ended up respecting the zone. Um, so after price pushed up and it came back and kind of respected my trend line, I went ahead and got in for a buy and I had two targets. I was targeting this zone as my first target, and then the previous high as my second target. From that point, I kind of waited. I think I might have had like one more to see if I could reach, my overall target. But price ended up respecting the previous high. Once it broke my trend line to the downside, I was out of all of my buys. But I was still waiting for my sell entry because I didn't want to enter too soon. I still was waiting for the break under this low for me to get in for my sales. So that was the beginning of the week, Monday. Tuesday, price did spike up and it did look like we were breaking these previous highs. But then when the very next candle was such a strong can sell candle, I was really unsure. So I didn't enter buys. I decided to wait and I was like, okay, if price breaks back above the zone again, that's when I'll get in for buys because I was a little uncertain there. And I'm glad that I kind of listened to my uncertainty because price ended up still ultimately respecting the zone and moving to the downside. And this is also where that divergence extended. There's 1 hour divergence. So you can see here how this is the high point on the RSI and it's actually making lower highs while this is making higher highs. This high is higher than this high. So you can see price is making higher highs, and then I'm going to zoom in to the RSI so you can see how price is making lower highs. So I noticed that divergence. It was like a nice strong candle, but I didn't get a secondary candle for confirmation. So I didn't take the buys. I didn't take the sells either. I just sat on my hands on Tuesday. Then comes Wednesday. And I'm gonna tell you my thought process. Wednesday, I was like, I was kind of trying to squeeze the trade in because price did break my zone, right? Um, and it broke and it probably would have hit one of my TPs. This was my overall target. But I'm sure I would have had it like a TP halfway through. Um, but it like pushed down. I wasn't able to again, but when it bounced back up and it basically respected my trend line, I was like, oh, okay, we might actually be moving to the downside. So I was waiting for a candle close below my zone for an entry. So I waited for my candle close. I got that. I got in. I was really just targeting that next zone. However, price ended up bouncing up. Mind you, this trend line that's here wasn't here. I just drew that today. So if I had seen it bouncing off my trend line, of course I'd have been like, no. Let me hide that. But it was basically open like this. So I was thinking price might sell down to this zone. Didn't get that sell down. Once price started breaking my trend line to the upside, I was like, okay, done with that trade. Um, and so then we'll fast forward to Thursday. So NFP ended up being on Thursday last week instead of Friday because we had Independence Day. It fell on Saturday, but the banks and everything were still closed on Friday. So NFP was Thursday. So this was like right before NFP. Um, Price got that big push up NFP. I didn't take that buy, but I did wait on price to just come back and retest this area because I was like, okay, price broke it. I waited on the retest and then I got an entry. I did close my targets here, so I caught about 30 pips from that move. And then I just waited. I really didn't want to be in the market on Friday because I knew that it was a bank holiday and we weren't going to see much market movement. And so that's what ended up happening Friday. So that is what happened last week. Um, it technically, it did kind of do what I was expecting it to do. But I was really unsure if we were going to start moving to the downside or continue this push to the upside. So now that we have those, I'm going to go ahead and delete them because this is my clean chart. So I try to keep it nice and clean. Um, I'm gonna delete that, but I'll leave those because I might end up using them again. So now let's talk about this week. Before we start with this week, though, I do want to go to the higher time frame so I can kind of show you that overall we are in selling market structure. This orange box was a consolidation zone. Price has broken out of that zone, but overall price moved down, created a lower high, created a lower low, lower than this previous low, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low. So right now we're still kind of in that creation of the lower high point, and I don't know how far back we're going to pull, right? I did mention price possibly coming to retest this trend line, so price could make a lower high here at this point and then start to push down. Price could be at its current lower high. Like this could be a lower high point before price continues its push down. But higher time frame is selling market structure for me until we get a break of this trend line to the upside or a break of the previous high, which would be this high here. Until we get that break, I still am in strong selling market structure for the higher time frame. Now, when it comes to the 1 hour time frame, though, however, I would say price is more so in buying market structure. Um, so if we have, I'll start here. We have a low, high, we have higher low, higher high, higher low, kind of have equal highs in here, right? But overall, we never broke below this previous low. So even though it kind of broke here, this is still a higher low point. And then price created a higher high. So on the 1 hour time frame, we are still in buying market structure. Um, so I did want to point that out. So now what I'm looking for this week, what I'm looking for entry. Um, I drew this trend line on Friday and price did break this trend line to the downside, and there is a little bearish divergence going on currently. Um, yeah. However, I don't want to hop into things too quickly. I want to make sure I have confirmation. So for me to enter sales, I would want a break of a previous low just to make sure that we're creating a lower low point. And to me, the previous low that sticks out the most would be this low that's here. So basically, I'm really waiting for a break below this zone to confirm that we could be getting a move to the downside. Um, I just want to see that lower low be created, and then that'll be when I'm probably looking for my sell entries. For this sell though, so let me break this down because we want to make sure we're taking things step by step because price could break below this zone, but there's still a trend line here. So my target for the sell is to this trend line. Now, when at that trend line, I'm waiting to see if price is going to actually break and retest this trend line. Now, if we get a break of this trend line, then that's confirmation that, okay, we're really moving to the downside. And then pretty much similar to last week, the same zones and everything. That's what I would be looking for this week. Um, I don't really want this one anymore. But this zone would be a target. This zone would be a target. And then if we get a break of this zone here, this bigger zone, that's still a possibility. Because a break of this low would actually be a break of this 1 hour, actually more like a 4 hour, kind of like a 4 hour low. So if we break that, um, that would be confirmation that we could get a nice move to the downside. So this could be the higher low point on the higher time frame, but I want a break of this trend line first before I try to look for sales any deeper. But as of right now, if price does break this 1 hour zone that's here, I will look for sales to that trend line and then kind of wait and see what price does. Because price could sell down to this trend line, respect it, and still keep pushing up. Because right now it is still in buying market structure. Um, okay, so that's for the sell. For the buy, um, really in this zone, I'm not touching it. But if price breaks above this 4 hour zone that's here, then I will probably look for some buys up to this trend line that we talked about from the 4 hour time frame. And then I will wait and see what price does from there. So if this buying momentum continues, remember just because we see divergence doesn't mean that price just automatically has to sell. It could keep on diverging. So if I do get a break of these previous highs, break above this zone, I will look for buys to that trend line and then kind of wait and see how price reacts. Um, I do have strong bias, I guess, that price, if it does push up, it will respect this trend line. But you never know. So I'm just watching. I'm gonna wait and see what the market does. And I'm gonna make sure I pay attention to the market structure and take things step by step. Really make sure you're waiting for those break of the strong zones, looking for the break of structures, making sure you're drawing your trend lines, and waiting for those trend line breaks or break and retest, depending on how you like to trade. But essentially, that's it. That's all I'm looking for this week. So it's kind of like a continuation of last week. Even though last week did play out, but you had to be like sitting and ready to kind of catch that move. Um, but overall, I do have more of a sell bias just because on that higher time frame, we are in selling market structure. But I've been waiting patiently for like this buy to be over. Because on the higher time frame, this is just a pullback. So I'm basically waiting for this pullback to be over, and try to catch another move down. So if you guys have any questions for me, make sure you comment them down below. You can always reach out to me if you have questions, comments, concerns. If you see something similar to me, let me know. Hope you guys enjoy the video. Leave me a like. That really helps me get in the algorithm. And other than that, I will see you guys next week.